Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. The work of famous artist Georgia O'Keeffe is synonymous with the natural beauty of northern New Mexico, so much so that it's known as Georgia O'Keeffe country. But it is also the traditional homeland of the Tewa Pueblo people. Their deep connection to the land can be overshadowed by the lore of O'Keeffe's legacy. A new art exhibit at the museum that bears O'Keeffe's name assembles works by Tewa artists to answer that legacy. We'll talk with some of those artists after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. Housing is not just a problem in major cities in Nevada. It's also an issue in rural parts of the state, including tribal nations. Thousands of tribal members want to come back home, but there's not enough housing available at the moment. KNPR's Jimmy Romo visited two tribes to tour their newest housing developments.
On the Walker River Paiute Tribe Reservation, tribal officials and community members break ground on the highly anticipated water looping system. This water project was a decade in the making, as tribal members have been wanting to live on the reservation. And with no available housing, they can't. Gina Williams came back to the reservation a decade ago to become the housing director of the Walker River Paiute Tribe to build out the tribe. Instead, she was met with unavoidable infrastructure issues.
You're thinking, okay, you can build homes and do things and find out that that was not going to happen. There had to be a moratorium.
It wasn't until 2024 that the Walker River Paiute Tribe was approved for a $20 million grant. That funding was later taken away months after President Donald Trump took office. Walker River Paiute Tribe Chairwoman Melanie McFalls knew that although the tribe is trying to save funds, coming up with the water looping funding would be worth the investment for generations to come.
You know, it was kind of hard to give up $3 million just like that, but we had to, or else we would have lost the entire project.
40 miles north of the Walker River Paiute Tribe, Fallon Shoshone Tribe's Housing Program Development Manager, Russell Dyer Redner, has seen how difficult getting housing can be.
It seemed like you're just basically waiting for somebody to die or something drastic to even have a chance at housing.
When Russell wanted to come back home to the reservation, he was told the same thing as many others. There's no housing available. To combat the lack of housing, the tribe is building a 22-unit housing project. These projects are adding housing to the reservation, but in small numbers with the help of federal funding. These federal funds come out of a big pot of money, where all 574 federal tribes nationwide are applying for a piece of the pot. And every year, the pot keeps shrinking.
There's always going to be a shortage. But if we can meet, majority of our needs, we'll do our due diligence, and hopefully people will be able to come back.
And that's what tribal leaders from reservations across the state want, to bring their members back home.
That was Jimmy Romo reporting. 5 Native Americans were among the 29 people named Bush Fellows this year. The Bush Foundation provides up to $150,000 over 2 years for fellows to build on their leadership skills. In the first of 5 profiles, Brian Bull of Buffalo's Fire shares what an award-winning filmmaker plans to do.
Leah Hale has been with Twin Cities PBS for 13 years and has won regional Emmys for her work, including the films Reclaiming Sacred Tobacco and The People's Protectors. But the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate and Diné Nations artist feel she falls short in one area: technical expertise.
Learning about how to capture good quality audio, even when it comes to more of the technical side of editing, like color correcting and those types of things. That's something that I really want to learn more of, because I get asked often to do mentoring to up-and-coming youth and storytellers.
Hale's grand vision is to create a worldwide network of Indigenous filmmakers and artists who will share their cultural stories authentically and accurately. Hale also hopes to use her Bush Fellowship Award to build on her Dakota language skills. Her new film, Medicine Ball, is set for release next year. It looks at how basketball emerged out of boarding schools. For National Native News, I'm Brian Bull.
And I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
From comics to games to film and TV, Indigipop X is Native American popular culture. Everyone is welcome this weekend at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. Info at indigipopx.com who support this show.
Support by Sonosky Chambers Law, championing tribal sovereignty and Native American rights since 1976. From opioids litigation to treaty rights to tribal self-governance. With offices in Washington, D.C., New Mexico, California, and Alaska. Sonosky Chambers Law.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. A new exhibition at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe takes a critical look at how the museum's namesake overshadows Pueblo connections to lands in northern New Mexico that are associated with O'Keeffe's work. The collection, Tewa Nange, Tewa Country, features 12 northern Pueblo artists in conversation with O'Keeffe's work and influence. Their work reclaims the narrative of their homelands, which is sometimes dubbed Georgia O'Keeffe Country. The work challenges viewers to think about place, identity, appropriation, and colonization. It's the first exhibit of its kind on display at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. In this hour, we'll speak with the curators and some artists of the Tewa Country exhibit. You can join our conversation, too. Does Georgia O'Keeffe's work influence your view of the Southwest? Are Native artists in your community reclaiming a regional narrative and aesthetic? Let us know. We're at 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now from Santa Clara Pueblo in New Mexico is Jason Garcia. His Tewa name is Okupin. He is a co-curator and an artist in the Tewa Nange Tewa Country exhibition at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. He is Kapo Owenge, which is Santa Clara Pueblo. Jason, hello. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome back.
Yeah, good morning, Sengitamu Native America Calling listeners. Thank you for being on the show.
Sengitamu to you as well. Joining us from Santa Fe, New Mexico is Bess Murphy. She is the Luce Curator of Art and Social Practice at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. She co-curated the Tewa Country exhibition with Jason. Bess, hello, and welcome to Native America Calling.
Hello, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here today. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Joining us from New York City is Michael Namingha. He is a conceptual multimedia artist. He is Oke Owenge and Hopi. Michael, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Sean. I'm glad to be here.
And our fourth guest joins us from Santa Fe, New Mexico, Shireen Pilar Gonzalez. She is a writer, a director, and a filmmaker. She is from San Ildefonso, Pueblo. Shireen, good morning, and welcome to Native America Calling.
Olátamo, Sengitamu. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Sengitamu to you as well. And Jason, I'm going to go ahead and begin with you. Tell us more about how this exhibit came about and when you knew it was time to have this kind of conversation, a pushback, a critical pushback against the influence of some of these popular artists.
Yeah, so the original idea had kind of, the seed was planted in 2020. We had a panel presentation with the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, and it was titled, "This is Not O'Keeffe Country." It was moderated by Dr. Alicia Guzman, writer from Santa Fe and northern New Mexico. And then it also had Dr. Corrine Sanchez from Tewa Women United out of San Ildefonso, Pueblo, and Dr. Christina Castro of Three Sisters Collective out of Taos Pueblo and Jemez Pueblo. So we had discussed about, the mythology of Georgia O'Keeffe, talked about settler colonial issues, talked about land issues. My talk primarily focused on Tewa land, place names, and, she was based later on in the 1940s or so. She moved to northern New Mexico to Abiquiu, Avishu. Avishu is a traditional Tewa name for Abiquiu, and translates to the Valley of Chokecherries. And then she also had a place in Ghost Ranch. And so that's where the original seed was planted. 2-3 years later, I had worked with Bess in Santa Fe at the museum there, and she had moved over to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, and I had approached her about potential for a grant application, and we applied for it. Went through all the process of figuring out who we would invite as far as the artists, Tewa artists, specific Tewa artists from the 6 Tewa Pueblos located in northern New Mexico, which is Okiawinge, San Juan Pueblo, Capo-Winge, Santa Clara Pueblo, Ohoge-Owinge, San Ildefonso Pueblo, Tetsuge-Owinge, Tsuki Pueblo, Posuenge-Owinge, Pewaukee Pueblo, and Nambe-Owinge, Nambe Pueblo. So I had approached different artists and collaborators, scholars that would be interested in the project, and we just kept the ball rolling. We didn't get the original grant application, but we applied for some others, and the museum was really behind all of us. They were behind the project. They weren't said not to censor our we weren't going to be censored. Our ideas, our thoughts, that it was something that they really wanted to take on, especially after the Georgia O'Keeffe, or This Is Not O'Keeffe Country panel. And so that's kind of where we started. And it's been a 2+ year process of planning, meetings, studio visits to Avishu, to Georgia O'Keeffe's 2 homes and studios. And, it's been an amazing journey of working with the other 11 collaborators and Bess, and also the staff at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum.
Jason, it sounds like a lot of really very accomplished and well-respected folks involved in this whole project, especially the 12 Northern Pueblo artists who are featured, including yourself. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the legacy of Georgia O'Keeffe. You maintain that she took Tewa land, and some of the things she said and did, ownership, took a sense of ownership in northern New Mexico. What makes you say that?
What makes me say that? So there's a very widely published quote that Georgia O'Keeffe had said, and it was in the Newsday article of October 30th, 1977. And she had said, "It's my private mountain. It belongs to me. God told me if I painted it enough, I could have it." And the quote is in reference to Tsiping, which is Cerro Perdonal. Tsiping translates to like flaking stone or chert mountain. And that's what's used for arrowheads, tools by Tewa people. And, it's also a sacred landmark. There's also an ancestral Tewa village located nearby that shares the same name as the mountain, Tsiping. And so the fact that, she claimed ownership of saying, if I paint this enough times, she painted it 29 times. And so, that fact of saying, if I paint it enough, it's mine. And then
Okay.
there's also some other areas related to that as well.
Well, let me just ask you, because context matters here, right? And somebody can make a statement like that and say, this is mine. This mountain is mine. I own it. Or they could just kind of jokingly offhand say, look, I just feel such a connection here. I feel like it's mine. But it doesn't sound like you're willing to give her that benefit of the doubt, Jason.
And then also in our research as well, too, she was very adamant of houses at Ghost Ranch. She moved there, visited a summer, came back the next year. Various cowpokes were in a quote unquote her house. She made that very clear. What are they doing in my house? And then she also worked at purchasing land and homes within Ghost Ranch, and then also had, through coercion, she had also purchased the house in Abiquiu and Avishu as well too, from the archdiocese and the villagers of Abiquiu. So there was some coercion there as well too. So it wasn't like it was just easily handed over to her. And then also some of it, the thoughts also come from another quote of, when she first came to New Mexico, there was something different about the land, the air. the sky, and she said, this is mine, this is my country. So certain facts of that, and then it was used for a New Mexico True ad as well too, which was pulled after some not so happy comments regarding colonization.
Okay. All right. Well, Jason, I want to ask you about your pieces in the exhibit. They are mock comic book covers, and you've been on the show before talking about these types of comic book covers you do. They're very well known. I see them in different museums and casinos in northern New Mexico. Tewa Tales of Suspense. And they actually include comic images of Georgia O'Keeffe. Tell us about them.
So the series that I've been working on, Tewa Tells of Suspense, was started in 2007, and it's inspired by comic book covers, by graphic novel covers, stories, and a lot of the work documents Tewa creation stories, migration stories, historical events like the Pueblo Revolt, the quote-unquote bloodless reconquest of New Mexico in 1692, and then also it has various effects of the Pueblo Revolt, after effects, and the most couple of recent pieces that I've created, two in particular that are in the exhibition, are a piece that is entitled "This is Tewa Country," and it shows Georgia O'Keeffe standing near Colonel Seeping behind her. And there's a sign that says, "Welcome to O'Keeffe Country," but then on top of O'Keeffe is the word Tewa. So just reasserting that, we are on Tewa land. This is Tewanange, Tewa Country. Our ancestors are still here. We still have 6 Tewa Pueblos, modern day Pueblos, contemporary Pueblos. We still have our ancestral names for our sites, our Tewa areas. We still visit our shrines. We still visit our ancestral areas. So that's kind of what a lot of the focus of that particular piece talks about. And then another piece that I have is a Barbenheimer piece, and it's a mashup of the Oppenheimer and the Barbie movie, which shows a corn maiden cruising along the Pajarito Plateau, which is also another ancestral place of many villages when we migrated it from the Four Corners area, Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, and villages like Puje or Tsidige, Oshu.
Okay. All right.
Different.
Kunda, brother, I always enjoy it when you come on this show. We're going to have to take a short break. We will be right back. Listeners, stay with us. A surprise provision snuck into the bill that ends the federal government shutdown is sending shockwaves through native hemp producers. Opponents of the bill say it shutters a $30 billion industry. We'll hear about that and other developments as the government begins to reopen. That's on the next Native America Calling.
From comics to games to film and TV, all Native American popular culture will be at the Indigenous Pop Culture Expo. The Indigenous Pop Culture Expo showcases Native American and Indigenous creatives and communities in a way that dispels the myth natives are a people of the past, instead showing Native identity in all its past, present, and future glory. Everyone is welcome at the Expo this weekend at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. Info at indigipopx.com, who support this show.
We're glad you're with us today on Native America Calling. We're talking about a new art exhibit called Tewa Country at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. It features 12 Pueblo artists responding to and scrutinizing the work and influence of the renowned painter. You, of course, as a listener, can join this conversation. Just give us a call, 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Tell us what interests and excites you most about this new exhibit, Tewa Country, 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's speak now with Bess Murphy. She is the Luce Curator of Art and Social Practice at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. She joins us now from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And Bess, we heard from Jason earlier. Give us some of the background, some of the history with regard to Georgia O'Keeffe from a Northern Pueblo perspective, but help us understand also the influence Georgia O'Keeffe has had in New Mexico and other parts of the state, and how her art did essentially, to some people, put New Mexico on the map.
Absolutely. Appreciate that, and definitely appreciate Jason's introduction of the project, and the bigger ideas that sort of have been nourishing us for the past 2 years. Georgia O'Keeffe first began visiting New Mexico in 1929, so a pretty significant moment in our national history as well, thinking about the Depression and the Dust Bowl and drought and so many issues going on. But she did really feel connected to this place, like many artists before and after her. I think, she became a very iconic artist for 20th century American art, and she lived pretty much that entire century. She lived almost 100 years, and in her lifetime, she was probably the most successful woman artist in the United States and continues to be incredibly popular. And I think that success in her lifetime did have a really direct effect on how New Mexico sort of became linked with the mythology of her as an artist, as an independent woman alone out in the empty desert. And I say that obviously sort of jokingly, but I think she was portrayed that way in the media during her lifetime and since then. And I think a lot of the work that this exhibition is trying to do is unpack what it means for one person to be so mythologized, to become so iconic, so that they can come to represent in many people's minds an entire place, an entire state, an entire landscape, an entire history.
Now, Georgia O'Keeffe, originally from the Midwestern part of the United States, and she, as you explained, she first visited New Mexico in 1929, so that would have been around the time of the Great Depression. What ultimately inspired her to move to New Mexico, and then not just New Mexico, but the unique little community of Abiquiu in northern New Mexico?
Yeah, when she first started visiting New Mexico, her first summer here, she actually wound up staying at Mabel Dodge Lujan's home in Taos, like so many other modernist artists and writers and dancers, philosophers. And I think she really, really fell in love with New Mexico. She had spent time earlier in her life teaching in Texas. And so she spent many years around Amarillo and Canyon, Texas, and loved the openness there. But wound up in New York and wound up in a relationship with Alfred Stieglitz, who was her husband, and also her art dealer, her gallerist. And so they had a very fraught relationship for many decades. And I think part of her move to New Mexico was that she wanted to have some independence in that relationship again. But she did really connect here with this place. And after her first few summers going up to Taos, she spent time in Alcalde. And on those drives, she passed through Abiquiu and heard about Ghost Ranch. And so she first started staying at Ghost Ranch, which at that point was owned by Arthur Pack and was functioning as a dude ranch. And she spent many summers staying there and eventually purchased her first home in New Mexico from Arthur Pack. And it is within the larger property of Ghost Ranch. And to get up there, originally the highway or the road to get up to Ghost Ranch went directly through the village of Abiquiu. And she was continuously driving past this old adobe hacienda, and she loved it and sort of snuck into it. It was empty at that time and had been for a really long time. And she, as Jason said, she pursued it for over 10 years. It was owned by the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. at that point, and she wrote to them constantly, and it took 10 years for her to persuade them to sell it to her. Yeah, which is also complicated. It's a land grant community, and so there had to be approval for her from the land grant. The museum still owns the home and studio there. It's no longer part of the land grant, but we do still maintain the water rights. So we maintain the acequia and try and contribute as much as we can, fully understanding how complicated that legacy really is.
Bess, we've got a caller on the line. This is Jen. She's a frequent listener, and she joins us from East Texas. Hello, Jen. Good to have you calling in today. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. This is such an exciting program, and I'm so grateful that you've taken my call. This project is right on time and very exciting. How better to take land back than with art? And I haven't seen the 12 artists' artwork, but I'm so excited to do that. I mean, I visited Abiquiu and Georgia's gallery in Santa Fe, and I studied Georgia, and a lot of my pastel work reflects her as well as R.C. Gorman and Diego Rivera. And people buy my work sometimes because they think it's Georgia's or as close as they can get. But, you know, when I began to study her, I found out that she was definitely a colonizer. In fact, she was known to have kind of moved in on her friend there at Abiquiu and kind of took over it from him. And then she invited those people who were putting together the atomic bomb. So it definitely needs to be back to the people that it belongs to. And I'm just really happy to see that this is happening. And I want to see more of their work. Go for it.
Jen, I'm really happy you called in. And Bess, I'd like you to respond there because here, we hear Jen using words like land back and just, colonizer. And I'm curious to know, well, first off, about how many visitors does the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum get every year? And what do you want folks who will see this exhibit, Tewa Country, what do you want them to really take away and learn from this experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get around 140,000 visitors a year. So a lot of folks pass through our galleries. And the majority of those visitors at this point are from out of state. That's something that we really are hoping to work on improving. And I think doing projects that center artists from our place is central to that work. But it's also such an opportunity to be able to be in dialogue with people from other states, from other countries. And I think from my perspective, my hope really is that people have a deeper understanding of the layers of history in any place, whether it's they're learning more about Santa Fe and northern New Mexico of Tehuanangue, and realizing that there's so much more complexity than just one individual artist's depictions of this place, but also that they can carry that home too, and maybe think about how they can enrich or complicate their understanding of their homes, their places that they live in. So, yeah.
Thank you, Bess. 1-800-996-2848. That is the number. If more listeners would like to join our conversation, maybe you are in northern New Mexico, you're very familiar with Georgia O'Keeffe, the properties, the homes that she owned, the artwork that she created, give us a call. Tell us what you think. 1-800-996-2848. Let's bring another one of the artists into the conversation now. This is Michael Nomingha, and he is one of the collaborators, a participating artist in the exhibit Tewa Country. And Michael, first of all, I want to know what brought you and got you involved with the project. What were your reasons for contributing?
Well, I was asked by Jason. We were exhibiting together in an exhibition at the Colby Museum of Art in Maine with a group of other indigenous artists from New Mexico whose work was actually responding to artwork created by the Taos School of Artists. And I I think highlighting that exhibition, having this conversation with Jason about his plan for his exhibition, the two just made a connection for me. And so when he asked if I would be interested in participating, I gladly accepted. Also, because I've exhibited before at the O'Keeffe Museum, I had a one-person show in 2018 where I was responding to a series of work by O'Keeffe that she painted in the 1930s and 40s that she called the Black Place. So I was very familiar with the museum and the collection and the history, and it just seemed like a great opportunity.
So it sounds like you've had some history there with the museum going back about 7 years. How does Georgia O'Keeffe's work strike you then and now?
Well, growing up in New Mexico, it was hard not to, for me at least, not know who Georgia O'Keeffe was. My father is an artist, Dan Namingha, and he's been painting professionally since I guess 1970. And so in his studio, he always had a lot of art books. I traveled to many museums with my parents, and so I was exposed to a lot of various types of art, and New Mexico modernism was one of them. And so I went to Parsons School of Design here in New York City, and in one of my, I guess, freshman year art history classes, the professor was going through a series of slides on American modernism and came across a painting by O'Keeffe that just so happened to be of her Black Place series that I had always assumed, because it is pretty abstract, were cloud formations with lightning, and later found out through the then curator at the O'Keeffe Museum, Carolyn Kastner, that it is not cloud formations, but a landscape located in the Four Corners region of New Mexico. And so my knowledge of O'Keeffe, I guess, goes back pretty far. And going to the art store with my father in Santa Fe, there's an art store called Artisans, and they had a signed check of O'Keeffe buying art supplies, I think for like $3, framed behind the cash register.
That's a good little piece of history there that I think our listeners are going to appreciate, Michael. Well, let's talk about one of your pieces in the exhibition. It's titled Disaster Number 8, and it responds to one of Georgia O'Keeffe's pieces.
Yes. So again, going back to how I respond to O'Keeffe's work, I like to do research on either a specific series or a specific painting. And for Tewanange exhibition, I was focusing on her pelvis series titled Red with Yellow. It was painted in 1945. So my disaster series is a series of 8 large-scale silk screens on canvas. And I started the series, created the series last year, but it goes back to 2022 when New Mexico had its largest forest fire on record, the Hermit's Peak Fire, which began in April of 2022 and burned for 5 months and consumed 346,000 acres in northern New Mexico. And so during this period, we would witness, as residents of northern New Mexico, this pyrocumulonimbus cloud. And a pyrocumulonimbus cloud is a cloud that is created by the intense heat of a forest fire, a volcanic eruption, or a nuclear explosion. And it's a very large anvil-shaped cloud that during the course of this 5 months would appear every few weeks, and it would kind of creep its way over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains and peek over, and then I decided to document the formation of one of these clouds over the course of one day. And so that's what my disaster series depicts. And the colorations of those pieces are brightly colored, but I'm looking at the air quality index color chart because I run outside. I'm a runner, and I would often check during the Hermit's Peak fire to see if it was safe to engage with the outdoors because they would give us our air quality index number every day. And so on the higher end of the spectrum, meaning there are more particulates in the air, determining that it is not safe to engage with the outdoors, those colors on the air quality index are usually yellow, red, at the very high end, maroon and purple. And so we were often at those levels during the duration of that fire. And so a lot of the coloration in my work is related to that. But when I was looking at O'Keeffe's red and yellow painting, it incorporates those same colors. And the fact that she painted it in 1945 also generated interest in me, given our relationship with the atomic bomb, which was created in 1945 in Los Alamos. And so I was witnessing the formation of this cloud during that forest fire and thinking about New Mexico's history with the atomic bomb, which was created opposite of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. And kind of an interesting...
Yeah. We're not giving you a send-off, Michael. That's the theme music coming in there. But we do have to take a break. And I'm looking at the piece online, Disaster Number 8. There's a beautiful photograph, really spectacular. Stay with us, listeners. We will be right back and continue this conversation.
Support from Clarkson Potter, publisher of Turtle Island, Foods and Traditions of the Indigenous Peoples of North America by Native American chef Sean Sherman. With ancestral and modern recipes, this cookbook showcases diverse foodways of the continent's regions.
Ready to expand your reach and inspire change? Kaufman & Associates crafts culturally grounded communication strategies for Native audiences. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
Thank you for joining us today on Native America Calling. Plenty of time left if you would like to join our discussion about renowned artist Georgia O'Keeffe and her influence over how Pueblo land in northern New Mexico is regarded. Questions or comments? Call us, 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's now speak with another participating artist in the Tehuenangue exhibition. This is Shireen Pilar Gonzalez from San Ildefonso, Pueblo. She's a writer, director, and filmmaker. She's in Santa Fe. And Shireen, you have an interesting role here. You followed the artists through their creations for the exhibit, and you produced a short film. Tell me more about what you learned in the process and just your whole participation in Tehuenangue and also Georgia O'Keeffe.
Sure. Yeah. It was really amazing, seeing all the works in progress from all the different artists. I respect every artist in this exhibition wholeheartedly. And, I'm just so grateful, to be in conversation with everybody at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum about Tehuenangue, because I think, there's no better people to talk about Tehuenangue, Tewa country, rather than us Tewa people. So I created two short films for the exhibition. One is the artist interviews that you had mentioned, and then another is a short experimental documentary called This Land Carries Us. I guess my main goal for this film was to really celebrate being Tewa and serve as a reminder to visitors that we are still here living and thriving on the lands that have always carried us. And I guess in response to O'Keeffe, This Land Carries Us, my short experimental doc, is really in reference to, what was left out of her work, right? Because Georgia O'Keeffe was very famous for these very beautiful landscape paintings and imagery. But I think, where I'm coming from is that we really can't talk about Tewa lands without speaking about Tewa people or showing our Tewa people. So for this short film, I really wanted to highlight, just family narratives and archival footage, astrovideography of our Tewa lands, and make sure that we were visible in this narrative because it's just really amazing to be a part of the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum and to celebrate being Tewa too.
Absolutely. And Shireen, what's your thought in terms of what the impact ultimately will be with this exhibition and the legacy of Georgia O'Keeffe? I mean, we've heard some pretty strong words with regard to her being this colonizer type of personality who kind of, stole so much of the legacy that belonged to Northern Pueblo people. What do you want? What do you want people to really understand, and what do you feel her ultimate legacy should be in northern New Mexico? Do you consider her a bad actor, or do you consider her a complex character who was a part of a type of a time frame that was long ago when people looked very differently at the world and at Native people? Or do you think, where are you at? I'm just curious.
Yeah, my screenwriter brain is like, what's Georgia's character arc? No, what I really hope that people take away from the exhibition is that, there's many sides of history that haven't been shared and highlighted in the way that they should be. And, this is Tewa land. I think that there's so many incredible Tewa artists, going back throughout history that for me, Georgia O'Keeffe is, I guess like a bookmark artist, but, in the same respect, one of the things I learned from my grandma, Barbara Gonzalez, is that Georgia O'Keeffe was actually friends with my great-great-great-grandmother, Maria Martinez, who's, very world famous for reintroducing Black on Black pottery to my Pueblo and my community. So yeah, I think it's a very complex history. I think Georgia did many great things for the art world, but that being said, I think there's just as many Tewa artists who also did very incredible things for the art world, and I think that's really something that I'd like for visitors to take away from the Tewa Nange exhibit.
Sure. Well, let's talk more about some of the fantastic Northern Pueblo participating artists in the exhibition. I notice Randy Silva from Santa Clara is there, and of course, longtime art instructor at the Santa Fe Indian School. Tell me more about him and some of the other artists.
Yeah, Randy's amazing. Shout out to Mema Randy. Randy created postcards, highlighting each of the Tewa Pueblos, and part of what he was doing with that project was to talk about how O'Keeffe had to have been influenced by all of the Tewa Pueblos during her time here in New Mexico. So it's really amazing to see, the postcard images that Randy created for each of our Tewa Pueblos. And something that I really appreciate too is that Randy actually did include Georgia O'Keeffe in a couple of those images, showing that she was at these feast days and dances. And what she took away from those experiences, I think that's for Georgia to speak to, wherever she is right now. But I think it's important to, recognize the history of our Tewa people and how, Georgia was in the community, right? So yeah, those postcards are pretty cool. And when Randy was originally talking about the idea, I was imagining, like these smaller postcards, but, come to find that when they're hanging in the exhibit, they're like these big, really grand images. So it's really cool. It's really cool to see, and happy to have talked with Randy about his process.
Yeah, well, I know Randy Silva. He doesn't do anything small. He goes all in every time. Jason, I'd like for you to chime in as well as a co-curator with some of the other artists in the show.
Yeah, so we had a amazing group of artists that worked in the exhibition. You know, they kind of we all researched different images that O'Keeffe had created, and were either inspired by that or not inspired at all, or questioned, you know, what the background was of the pieces, and then also using the Tewa language as well. As part of that, we had created a Tewa map that illustrates, you know, various ancestral villages of Tewa Nange, and then also the contemporary pueblos also have the name listed as well. But some of the other collaborators, Samuel Katnack of Pewaukee Pueblo is the director for Tewa language preservation, and he wrote a couple letters to O'Keeffe talking about, you know, his placement on the land, his assertion of his place in Tewa Nange and Posuenge Owinge, Pewaukee Pueblo. Another artist was Arlo Naminha, Michael's brother, and he created several sculptures representing the landscape, and a lot of that his work is based in depicting the land as well. And Martha Romero of Nambe Pueblo kind of went outside of her boundaries and talked about assimilation and her not growing up in the Pueblo, but coming back and moving to Nambe as an adult, and, you know, relearning, and you know, just a lot of issues that a lot of Pueblo people do face, you know, contemporary Native peoples do face in regards to displacement and then also migration. My father has some paintings, John Garcia, that talks about the migration of some of the ancestral villages to contemporary places, or moving out of state to, like, the Tewa, First Mesa, Arizona, 1700s. So, you know, a lot of different issues are brought up in the exhibition, talking about, you know, our assertion, our recognition, our love for Tewa Nange, for our Tewa landscape, for our Tewa country, and how it influences ourselves, our identities, our languages, our identities here, and that we still are remaining, you know, despite 500 plus years of colonization. What is it? Almost 100 years of Georgia O'Keeffe being on our landscape. So, you know, there's so many different things that are touched upon on the exhibition. And then also for the opening celebration, we also had a dance group from Oke Owinge that they came and danced within the museum. And I'm not sure if that's ever happened at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. And then also having young musician Jacob Shihei, my son from Santa Clara, with his band playing out on the street. And then also having Mangkol food truck chef Ray Naranjo of Santa Clara Pueblo sharing his culinary delights as well too. And then also for some other opening events, we had Mo and Co. Indian Tacos, Carolyn Gutierrez and her family from Santa Clara Pueblo also offered food. And so there's so many different collaborators that we had, amazing people. And then in addition to the Georgia O'Keeffe staff that were very hospitable, very welcoming, and very helpful in all of our research that we did.
All right. Yeah, it just sounds like an absolutely wonderful, wonderful exhibition, and everyone who's been involved just really going all out to make this a success. Shireen, I want to go back to you because we just heard Jason mention 100 years of Georgia O'Keeffe's legacy. And I think it's interesting because a couple of years ago, a Georgia O'Keeffe home came on the market in northern New Mexico, and the asking price was $15 million. $15 million. And they couldn't even count how many fireplaces were in the Spanish Pueblo revival style home. Put that into perspective for us, Shireen. What does that mean in the grand scheme of this whole conversation?
Yeah, I mean, you say $15 million. You know, it's hard because, you know, it's true that you like Pueblo people, these are our lands, right? And I think that a lot of us are struggling, you know, for that home stability, right? It's very expensive to live, you know, in Santa Fe surrounding areas. So yeah, I think I have a lot of mixed feelings hearing that, because I think that Tewa people deserve to have a good place to live on our lands, and I think a home going for $15 million, yeah, it's a little outrageous, and I understand that Georgia carries a very strong name, but again, I think it's very dismissive of our history here in New Mexico, and our current economic problems too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Michael Namingha, how about you? Any additional comments or thoughts with regard to the Georgia O'Keeffe legacy and how this exhibition perhaps will reframe it?
I think people will walk away with a new story, because I think they have one side of who they think O'Keeffe is, and then this is a different, I guess, more like unpublished history of the area, and I think a lot of the viewers will find it interesting and have something new to say.
I also want to ask you about another one of your works in the exhibition. It has the words "I hate flowers" across a photo of a mesa. What's behind that piece? I'm curious.
So, like I said in the couple other pieces I've created for the museum, I love research-based projects, and so in looking at letters between Stieglitz and O'Keeffe, I discovered a lot of language, and I also came across a quote by O'Keeffe, not in the letters, but separately, where she said, "I hate flowers, but they don't move, and they're cheaper to use than live models."
Yeah, that's interesting. Georgia O'Keeffe, I'm really learning a lot from this show in terms of the history there, who she was as a person. And again, just keep going back to this legacy and what she means now, because it's been a long time. She has been gone for a long time. And Bess Murphy, I want to give you the last word here. We've got about a minute before we have to wrap up. And I'm just curious, hearing some of these thoughts here from the artists, from the participants. There have been some strong words, some in praise, but many critical of Georgia O'Keeffe. What's your thought on a personal level of her legacy right now?
I mean, I think all of these layers are so important. I was born and raised in Santa Fe also, and raised by artists. I grew up with that sort of shadow of O'Keeffe as well. And I think, everyone in this exhibition, it's been wonderful to see how they've discovered new layers, like Michael was saying, new layers to their own identity, to their own stories, new layers to what their understanding of O'Keeffe is. She was a human, and she was a human in her time, and in no way am I apologizing for her actions or her words, but I just love that we're being able to add to this complexity and not keep it a one-sided story.
I do too. And thank you for finishing us up here, Bess. Really appreciate your input and, of course, all of your participation in the project. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up our conversation for today. But big thanks to the guests who joined us, Bess Murphy, Jason Garcia, Michael Namingha, and Shireen Pilar Gonzalez. And please, listeners, don't forget, join us again next week. We'll have another lineup of conversations about more Indigenous issues and topics. Our executive producer is Art Hughes. Our producers are Andy Murphy, Sol Traverso, and Joe Thompson. Marino Spencer is the engineer. Sho McPolin is the digital producer. Nola Daves Moses is the distribution director. Bob Peterson is the network manager for Native Voice One. Clifton Chadwick is our National Underwriting Sales Director, and Tonia Gonzalez is the anchor for National Native News. Charles Sather is our Chief Operations Officer. The President and CEO of Koahnic Broadcast Corporation is Jacqueline Salee. Have a safe weekend. I'm Sean Spruce.
The Association on American Indian Affairs invites all to Tribal Museums Day, December 6th through December 12th. Tribal museums may offer no-cost or reduced admission, art markets, and live cultural demonstrations. Tribal Museums Day honors diverse Native nations as the experts of their own cultures. You can find a map of tribal museums and more at indian-affairs.org/Tribal Museums Day. The association supports this show. Support provided by Amerind. Amerind is 100% tribally owned and partners with tribes and their businesses to provide affordable commercial insurance coverage, protect tribal sovereignty, and strengthen Native American communities by helping to keep dollars in Indian country. Information about property, liability, commercial auto, and workers' comp available at amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.